God bless everybody. Today it's October 25th of 2023. This is going to be a really quick update on a few stories coming out today about the Middle East and how that could be affecting prophecy at this very moment. This first article indicates today we had all the top leaders of Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Jihad basically in the same room. You can see their pictures here. They're trying to figure out what to do next. They're talking about Beirut and how that, they're in Beirut. They're talking about how they're going to deal with the Gaza situation and how they're going to aid the Gazans or the Palestinians down there and these proxy groups that are keep attacking Israel. And so they're planning their next moves. Just realize this is just happening now. And so, you know, basically these leaders are coming up with their next plan of attack. And we just had these before, and it was amazing. We had these leaders come together, and then shortly after that we had an attack, but nobody seemed to understand that anything was happening here. So just realize that this is happening at this very moment in time. And then another article came out today that I thought was really important. Erdogan from Turkey came out in a speech in Parliament in front of his people in Turkey. Now he's getting his people ready for war. You need to understand that he's preempting this through his speeches, through his actions, all the things that he's doing. This man is getting ready to go against Israel soon. Okay? So in this article, Turkey's Erdogan says Hamas is not a terrorist organization and cancels his trip to Israel because he's cutting ties with Israel. So look at what he's saying here. So Erdogan is stepping up his criticism of Israel and its Western backers, which is us and anyone like the Kurds that might be a problem for him. He calls for an immediate ceasefire, unhindered entry of aid into Gaza. And so this is extremely important because it's amazing that, you know, they could go into Israel, kill that many people, capture 200 plus people, take them across the border, do all these horrendous horrific things that they did, but then, oh, let's call a ceasefire and don't worry about it. You know, I get it. Israel's been bombing them, and there's a lot of carnage on the other side too. But Israel has to respond. They're going to have to do a land invasion. It's just what it is. And Erdogan has been talking about that humanitarian corridor and how he wants aid into Gaza, full aid, which would then just resupply Hamas again because that's the government running Gaza right now. He says Hamas is a liberation group, and then he cancels his planned Israeli trip. And so my question is, why still are no one talking about Turkey, and why is no one talking about the Kurds, and why is no one talking about Daniel 8, and why is no one talking about why Erdogan is getting ready to do what he says he's going to do? Create a 70-kilometer buffer into Syria and Iraq, which would then cause all kind of friction on the Kurds, which would then compress the Middle East. And then Erdogan comments were condemned by Israel. So Netanyahu comes out and condemns these these comments by Erdogan, and so this is just starting to blow up. Okay. It says here that Erdogan, in the strongest comments yet, so he's being very stern in how he's going about this. He's not messing around. His strongest comments yet on Gaza's conflict said on Wednesday the Palestinian militant group Hamas is not a terrorist organization, but a liberation group fighting for protection of Palestinian lands. And if you go back in the history of the Bible, the Philistines, the Palestinians, have always been a problem for Israel. Okay? It's just the way it's always worked, and they're going to be a problem today as we move forward into prophecy into the next 4 years or so here. NATO member Turkey condemned the civilian deaths caused by Hamas on October 7th. rampage in southern Israel, but also urged Israel forces to act with restraint in their response because he wants them to protect these Palestinian people because he's a Muslim. He doesn't want anything to happen to them, but he also has to come out and say, well, I feel for you, Israel. Sorry it happened, but we don't want you to invade. We don't want you to do anything about it. And, it could happen again. It's not our problem. So he's forcing, urging Israel to restrain their response. We've been doing the same thing. They keep saying that's a good thing for Israel, but it's not. The longer you allow these people to have time to refortify and get ready for this massive invasion that is going to happen, it is going to be a much harder trudge for the Israeli groups that are going down in there. And so Ankara has strongly criticized Israel's bombardment of Gaza. It says Hamas is not a terrorist organization, it is a liberation group, or a mujahideen, I don't know how you say that, waging a battle to protect its land and its people. He told lawmakers in his ruling AK party using an Arabic word denoting those who fight for their faith. So see, he's pulling this caliphate out soon. He's going to create a jihad against the Christians and the Jews. You do realize this is the Ottoman nightmare that's coming upon you, the feet of clay and iron that can't seem to mix. All 10 nations are Muslim. There's nothing to do with communism here. They're all 10 Muslim nations. They don't really get along, but they will get along if you're talking about the destruction of Israel, because that's their purpose. Okay, so regardless of they don't like each other, even the Shia and the Sunnis are coming together at this very time. They're literally both attacking Israel at this very moment. And so you got to realize that the Muslims will come together. Unlike many of its NATO allies and European Union, Turkey does not consider Hamas a terrorist organization and hosts members of the group on its territory. Ankara backs a two-state solution to the decades-old Israel-Palestinian conflict. And if you go back in time in the history of the Jews and God's commandments, do not split the land of Israel or the Jews. You do not split it. This has been part of this problem with these talks, is that they're talking about a two-state solution, and in God's world that can't happen. You should never split his land. Should never divide it in any way, shape, or form. So for them to come and do this usually creates a judgment against those nations, okay? It's not my words, it's his, okay? God tells you that if you split his nation in half in any way, shape, or form, pieces, parts, or whatever, you will find yourself under judgment because you should never do this division of the land. Erdogan also slammed Western powers for supporting Israel's bombing of Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire, an unhindered entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and for Muslim countries to work together to stop the violence. The perpetrators of the massacre and destruction taking place in Gaza, he's not talking about Israel here, okay? He's talking about the destruction from Israel and the massacre on Gaza are those proving unlimited support for Israel, says Erdogan. Israel attacks on Gaza for both itself and those supporting them amount to murder and mental illness. Okay. I do not know what we do not see about this that is going to be a problem for us. Okay, it's going to be a serious problem for us as we move forward. You've got to understand what Erdogan is. This man is the white horseman of Revelation. I've been talking about this for a while. He's getting ready to bring a quarter of the world into war. He's going to force the Kurds down into Iran. He's going to take Iran out. But he's also going to take Egypt out first and then go to Iran. We talked about how Alexander went through the Middle East. Alexander the Great is the pattern that's going to form in front of you. I've been talking about a past to future prophecy, and you need to be watching this. Erdogan will drive down into, he will start in his tip in Turkey. He will be attacked. He will then eliminate that threat to a certain degree, drive them east, which is the Kurds, and then he will drop down into Syria, Lebanon, skirt around Jerusalem to Gaza, take care of the Gazan issue, and then he'll go to Egypt because he does not like Egypt. Okay? He loathes Egypt. He's not a big fan of theirs right now, and there's so many reasons why he's not a fan of theirs. You've got to understand what is happening here. So let's keep on with this real quick. Israel rejected Erdogan's description of Hamas, of course, with foreign ministry spokesperson calling for the group a despicable terrorist organization. Even the Turkish president attempted to defend the terrorist organization, and his inciting words will not change the horrors that the whole world has seen. Erdogan comments also drew a shift rebuke from the Italian deputy prime minister, who said they were grave and disturbing or disgusting and did not help with de-escalation. Well, of course, he's escalating this, you idiots. Look, if you can't see what's getting ready to happen in front of you, I don't know what to tell you. Israel didn't see what was coming to them. I've heard this so many times. They didn't have the intel. They just didn't know this was going to happen to them. Even though these guys have been training and doing exercises on the very day that they actually did it. So all I had to do is say, hey, we're not doing training exercises. We're doing a live fire exercise today, boys and girls. Okay, it was that simple. And Israel was way behind them on the ball. It actually took them hours to get in there and actually clean these guys out. By the time they had done it, it was maximum carnage. Shares of Istanbul dropped on Wednesday, of course, and the lira is crumbling in front of him. His economy's in terrible inflation, like 60% inflation. I can tell you exact numbers right now. It keeps rising. And in a slide that traders attributed to Erdogan's comment on Hamas. Why? Because you're going to see a widening of this conflict in the Middle East right now with Israel. Okay, and this is the biggest concern, is once he gets into it, it forces fuels up, it shuts down causeways, it allows grain and fuels not to be moved through the continents. They have to go around. It causes all kinds of conflict in the Black Sea and through the Straits of Hormuz and all these different areas, Red Sea, different places, that you have, Caspian Sea, different places that have to be looked at here. It's all being affected by Turkey. The fighting in Gaza comes at a time when Turkey is working to mend its ties with Israel after years of but they're not anymore. It's totally on the ground. There's nothing left of this with Israel and Turkey. So just that's not going to happen. And now that he's pulled all his people out of Israel, there's just not going to be any reconciliation at this point. Indicating that those normalization efforts were now suspended. Erdogan accused Israel of taking advantage of Turkey's good intentions and said he had canceled a previously planned visit to Israel. I shook the hand of the man named Netanyahu one time in my life, Erdogan said, referring to his meeting with Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly last month. So he just, for the first time, Erdogan's been in office for over 20 years, so they're not friends, finally shook Benjamin Netanyahu's hand last month for the very first time. And then all of a sudden we see a massive breakdown. That should tell you something right there. If he, Netanyahu, had continued his good intentions, with relations might have been different. But now, unfortunately, that will not happen either, because they took advantage of our good intentions. He added, Erdogan accused the West of hypocrisy for failing to respond to what he calls Israelis' intentional massacre in Gaza with the same divisiveness as it did to Russia's invasion to Ukraine. Well, I don't know about that, but regardless, he did have to come out, basically condemn it, and then he turned his back on Russia, which is now aligned with Iran. So Russia's in a bad place when Turkey finally does come down into this, and this has nothing really to do with Russia anyway, because this is a Jew, Christian, Muslim thing. As I've been telling people, if they're talking Russia, China, red dragons, bears, and things like that, they'll take you out of the Middle East, then they are not talking prophecy. They're talking speculation. Okay? So just realize that. This is the man you should be watching. This is the White Horseman. When he finally gathers his 10 nations against Israel after Iran falls, once the Kurds align with Iran, he destroys them. He will bring 10 nations against Israel, and he'll die against the nation of Israel, and he'll be buried with his armies for 7 months prior to a trumpet phase, which will then bring forth an antichrist phase, and we've talked about that many times. This guy's going to be extremely important as we move forward, and you're going to hear a whole lot more about him. And in this last article, I wanted to bring you up to date on things. Israel Hamas lore, live updates. Netanyahu says Israel is preparing for ground invasion. They're still talking about all these potential hostage releases, whether they would release the civilians and keep the military hostages, or they would release Americans, or what's going on. All this is happening in Qatar. I'm sure Turkey's in the middle of that one too, so keep your eye on that. Netanyahu says Israeli is preparing for ground invasion, fuel and other supplies running low in Gaza. And this could be a tactic of Israel to put maximum pressure on the Gazan people to overthrow the Hamas government, because they will put them in a situation of complete duress. They have no food, water, fuel, or any way to survive. This then puts pressure on governments and leadership organizations like Hamas, and this also puts a lot of pressure on the relief organizations, which may or may not be there for a positive intention. You don't really know what some of these guys are doing down there. So just realize that all this is happening out here. There's a lot of coverage going on. Biden's trying to slow the Israeli occupation down. There's probably a reason for that. I'm not necessarily sure I understand exactly what Joe's intention is. The longer they hesitate in this, it will cause all kinds of problems. And, there's all kinds of different articles and things going on here that I'm not going to get into. I do want you to realize, mainly though, you've had an additional meeting in Beirut with all the main terrorist leaders. That was today. Erdogan is threatening at his highest tone to date that he's going to go in and start to potentially protect these people. He wants demands from NATO. He wants demands to protect these Gazan people, and I believe that if he doesn't get his demands, and I think that's one of the reasons he's allowing possibly the ascension of Sweden, is to give a little to get a lot. Okay, that's sort of Erdogan's plan and has been for some times. And like you say, when he wants these open corridors, I'm guessing that a lot of things will go through those barriers that will be used against Israel and us over time, as he protects these Muslim groups of people as we move forward. So God bless everybody. Keep an eye on this one. Things are moving quickly. We're working towards that November 7th date. That's the first date I've been talking about, and how we potentially would see an attack on Turkey or something through the Kurds, possibly, that would then bring Turkey into this invasionary mode, into Syria, through Lebanon, down into Israel, into Gaza, which would then change the Middle East. God bless. Find the open door. Find Jesus. Be safe out there, folks.